Hello everybody, welcome back to Political Excess. Trying to get these deep dives done. I've got another one here for you today. Let's take a look at the U.S. Senate election in New Hampshire. I've already done the race for governor there, so some of this information will overlap. Take a look at that video if you'd like. But let's quickly try to go through this one. Let's start on Ballotpedia and get a little bit of background. The incumbent senator is Democrat Maggie Hassan, and she is running for re-election to a second term. 6 years ago, when she first won election, she won an extremely narrow race. She got just under 48%. She beat incumbent Republican Kelly Ayotte by about 1,000 votes. Prior to serving in the U.S. Senate, Hassan did serve several terms as governor of New Hampshire. Her opponent on the Republican side is Don Bolduc. Bolduc has background in the military. He was a brigadier general, and he also ran for the U.S. Senate 2 years ago. He finished second in the Republican primary with about 42% of the vote. So let's see how they did in their primaries. Well, Maggie Hassan was almost unopposed. She won with over 93% of the vote. And Don Bolduc, you might remember, he did have a very competitive primary. He won with 37.1% of the vote over Chuck Morse, who got 35.8%. And there will also be a Libertarian candidate on the ballot as well. Let's go down here and see how this race is rated. Cook Political Report has it at Lean Democratic, Inside Elections has it at Tilt Democratic, and Larry Sabato has it at Lean Democratic. My own rating has been lean for the Democrats. New Hampshire is a state in the Northeast, so it's usually a little bit harder for Republicans to get elected. Even in a state like New Hampshire, which is the reddest of the states in the Northeast, they will occasionally elect Republicans, but I will say it's an uphill climb. And Don Bolduc was not the nominee that the establishment wanted. He's viewed as a little bit more unelectable than Chuck Morse was, his runner-up opponent in the primary. So most people have written off Don Bolduc as just a little bit too far out there to get elected. And they might be right, but they might be wrong. This is not going to be a blowout. It's a smaller state. Both of these candidates can make the rounds, cover all the different counties, cover many of the different towns. Maggie Hassan does have probably higher name recognition. She was the governor, of course. But Don Bolduc, he does have a strong military background. It's going to be a few extra points for him there. I think if Hassan loses at this point, it would definitely be considered an upset. But we'll come back to that a little bit toward the end. Let's go down here and take a look at the campaign finance. And there was some news recently that a Republican Alliance super PAC has pulled out spending of New Hampshire. It's probably not a great sign for Bolduc, but spending is not everything. However, if we actually look at the amount raised here, Maggie Hassan has quite a lot more raised than Don Bolduc. She's spent a lot more, she has a lot more cash on hand, and in a small state like that, word is going to travel around the state quicker. And we can go down here and look at the satellite spending, and this tells you where some of the PACs are spending some money, doing some ad buys. So take a look at that if you'd like. But let's go down here and take a look at how the counties are trending on a presidential level. And I did do this in my governor's deep dive, so I'll try to go a little bit quicker through it. Let me just focus on the top line number here. There's only 10 counties in New Hampshire. 93.1% of the population lives in 8 of those counties that voted for Joe Biden back 2 years ago in 2020. So as far as who's winning these counties for president, it's pretty much the Democrat. However, that doesn't tell us anything about the margins, so let's go down here, and we can hover over any of these counties to look at the margins for the last 3 presidential elections. The most populous county is Hillsborough, and that did vote for Donald Trump the first time in 2016. He very narrowly eked out a win there. It switched back to Biden, and Biden won it by about 7.5 points last time. So if you hover over these counties, you can see the margins aren't complete blowouts. Biden actually did not get 60% in any of these counties except one, and that is Grafton County, where he got 61%. On the other hand, Trump's best performance in a county was 54%, and all this is just for presidential politics, but some of this is going to parallel other elections statewide, such as governor or Senate. And what we can do is go back to 2016 and take a look at the county map for Senate when Maggie Hassan very nearly won election the first time. And if we look at that most populous county, Hillsborough, remember that did vote for Joe Biden by over 7 points. Kelly Ayotte, the Republican, actually won that county by a few points last time. And in the bluest county of Grafton, Maggie Hassan won that with over 55% of the vote. So most of these counties are pretty close, and they only tend to lean one way or the other. Given that it's a smaller state, there's not a stark political divide in New Hampshire. I'm sure when you get down to it on a local level, there's of course going to be some of those differences. But just looking at the counties, it's a fairly competitive, close to even state, but I would say it does have a Democratic tilt. Let's move on to YouTube and see what they've got on their channels. Here's Maggie Hassan's. She's got some ads on here, and not a whole lot else. And here's Don Bolduc's channel. He doesn't have a lot on here. He's got a couple of news clips, some ads, and some of this is from back in his primary. And we can move on and see their official campaign websites. Here is Maggie Hassan's channel if you want to read about her, see what she's up to, or send her some money. And here's Don Bolduc's site if you want to see where he stands on the issues, take a look at his events, or donate to his campaign. So how about any debates? There actually was a debate not that long ago. Here's a link here that has the full debate if you want to watch it. I've actually not gotten to watch this debate yet. I've been very busy making these videos and doing some other things, but I do hope to get around to watch this one at some point. And let's go over to Wikipedia and take a look at the endorsements. Well, Maggie Hassan, she only has Kamala Harris from the executive branch. That's interesting. She does have a ton of organizations, though. But for whatever reason, there's no other elected officials from New Hampshire or any other state on here. Don Bolduc, he doesn't have a lot either. And curiously, he does not even have the Donald Trump endorsement. And Bolduc does have the Chris Sununu endorsement, even though Sununu wanted Chuck Morse as the nominee. And Bolduc also has Tulsi Gabbard. Let's go down and take a look at the polling. And in the aggregate, as of the time of this video, Maggie Hassan is leading 5.4% on Real Clear Politics, 49.7 to 44.3. On 538, she's up 7.4%. And how about the individual polls? Well, the most recent poll was actually sponsored by Don Bolduc's campaign, and that shows a 2-point race. Every one of the rest of these polls shows Maggie Hassan with a lead. Some of them have her in the high 40s, some of them have her in the low 50s. Don Bolduc is somewhere usually around the mid-40s. Some of the older ones have him in the low 40s. So if Don Bolduc is going to win, he's going to have to do it at the end, and he's going to have to make a move soon. Because according to the polls that we can see right here, unless every one of these is off by several points or more, the edge has to go to Maggie Hassan. Let's compare these poll results to see how they stacked up versus 2016. And remember, in that race, both candidates, Maggie Hassan and Kelly Ayotte, got just under 48% of the vote. So as we can see on a glance, these polls are kind of all over the place. And given that it was almost a tied race, it makes sense to see both candidates leading in some of these polls. Some of them did underestimate both candidates' overall support, and they probably did overestimate the third-party other vote. But looking a little more into it, they probably did underestimate Ayotte, the Republican, just a little bit more than they did Hassan. And finally, let's move over to Predicted and take a look at the markets. And there, Maggie Hassan is at 77 cents, favorite to win. Don Bolduc is down at 25 cents. So that is a strong advantage for Maggie Hassan. It's not insurmountable, but it's a clear advantage. So what is the conclusion here? Well, as I've said, Maggie Hassan has the edge. There's almost 2 weeks to go, so there's a possibility for some late movement for Don Bolduc. But even if there's movement, it doesn't mean it would go in his favor. He could go in the other direction. There is a small chance Don Bolduc can eke out a win. It would have to be a real red wave for that to happen, so I would not bet on it. But I don't think Hassan is going to win by 8 or 10 points. I think as of right now, we're probably looking at a 3 to 5 point win for Hassan. But again, that is subject to change. Don Bolduc was viewed as unelectable, too far right, an extremist. He was given all the usual labels. And at some point, I think that kind of just falls flat. The two issues that most Democrats run hard on, such as Maggie Hassan, abortion and the threats to democracy. I do think abortion is an issue that does favor Democrats. It's a one that a lot of different Republicans have had to backpedal on and provide a lot of updated nuance to their views. So that is one that I think benefits Hassan. The January 6th stuff and the threats to democracy, I've said it before, but I think Democrats focus way too heavily on that. I think most voters get burnt out on constantly hearing how that is this top issue. Maybe it's more potent than I think. So Hassan and Democrats are focusing really hard on the couple of issues that might have an advantage for them. Hassan has the political background, Bolduc has the military background. It's a red-leaning year. Most issues favor the Republicans, a couple favor the Democrats. New Hampshire as a whole does slightly tilt to the left. So having said all that, it's going to be a great race to watch in the final week or two. If Hassan ends up losing, it's going to be a major upset, and Republicans are going to have 54 or more seats in the Senate. Anyway, that is a dive into this New Hampshire U.S. Senate election. Let me know in the comments, are you following this race? Did you watch the debate, and is there some more things happening in this race that I'm unaware of? Let me know down below. And if you enjoy this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.